Welcome back to the Last Days Book Club, where we are reading the book In His Hand, written by Sophie Perez and Arpad Ashu, describing the story of Arpad's life, a young Romanian SDA pastor in the times of the former Soviet Union. In our last reading, we covered chapters 1 and 2, where we find Arpad as a young married man with 2 children, captured by the Czechoslovakian police for attempting to smuggle someone out of the country. In reality, he was smuggling no one, but was attempting to drive through Czechoslovakia to meet his wife in Yugoslavia and smuggle her out into Austria, where they would seek asylum. While in prison, he wonders where was God after he had helped him so much in the past. While in his cell, awaiting daily interrogation, he reminisces about his life as a child, when he survived a severe case of polio and was the only one of 276 cases who recovered completely without debility. He also remembered when, as a child of about 9, he was hit and run over by a huge dump truck without suffering a bruise or a scratch, much less severe injury. God had always been with him, but now he wonders if his work for the Lord is done, and this is to be his destiny, a 50-year prison sentence, and the end of his family and the churches he pastored. Chapter 2 closed with him being interrogated and questioned by a Czech official on his Adventist beliefs and credentials, which led him to reminisce about his high school years when he had also been questioned by the principal about his beliefs. We pick up the story now with chapter 3, entitled A Matter of Time. That was an accurate explanation you made of the last chapters of Darwin's Origin of the Species, Director Tudor said, spinning his pointer in his fingers, turning to survey the notes that Arpad had carefully detailed on the chalkboard. Arpad, you have reviewed with us what Darwin argues about the evolution of man, that contemporary species arose from a selection of ancestors through a process of descent with modification. You're a good student, at the top of your class, and you seem to understand natural selection and genetic variation thoroughly. Arpad knew he wouldn't be let off the hook this easily. The principal of the high school, who was also the philosophy teacher, turned again to the students. Arpad, you do agree with what you just told us, right? Director Tudor's slow smile was a sign to the class that he was ready to pounce. Arpad stood in front of his senior classmates. This was becoming a common occurrence, especially on Mondays, after he had been absent from school on Saturday. No, Comrade Director, not in macroevolution, Arpad replied. The class tittered. They looked at their teacher and then at Arpad with anticipation. So, tell us, Arpad, give us a diagram of how God made the universe and of how he created you. Explain creation for us. Go ahead and explain it to the class. We'll take notes. He stood back, smirking. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, Arpad said, his voice strong. He was friends with his classmates, and he knew that no matter how hard the communist teacher tried to humiliate him, his class would still be behind him. And the earth was without form and void. Right, right, scoffed Director Tudor. I know the Bible as well as you, Arpad. Skip that. How do you know that you were created? Prove it. He laughed. Faith, is it? You know about faith as well as I, Comrade Director. I think you need to have more faith to believe that this whole world just evolved in the universe, rather than accepting that God created everything, Arpad replied politely. Whenever I am in a close relationship with God, I can feel the positive effects of that relationship. I can feel the life-changing effects of that relationship in my life. He spoke with conviction. Holding his professor's gaze, he asked, "What does evolution do for you, Comrade Director?" The class was silent. Well, I have proof that you haven't been created, that you are part of evolution. Just look at your monkey face. The class hooted. Director Tudor made a monkey face, hunched over, bobbed up and down, and scratched his armpits. The class roared. Take your seat, Arpad. We can't spend all day on your special case. We need to spend some time now on political analysis. Class, take out your book by President Nicolae Ceausescu. The students thumped out their heavy books. Inside the cover of all the books, a picture of Ceausescu stared at each student. The first and only president of Romania had written 21 volumes, which the Communist Party accepted and used in their government meetings and legislature. Students had to know these doctrines thoroughly. They were required to memorize portions of Ceausescu's speeches and be able to recite quotes from them when necessary. Arpad hated this. He was often called on to explain his views to the class, as his tended to differ. But Arpad learned communism well. He felt that he must excel. The school would have no excuse to find fault with him in anything. Well, except for one thing: attendance. In Romania, everyone worked or went to school for 6 days. Sunday was granted free, though seemingly not for religious reasons, because it was as good a day as any for a rest. The school did not permit absences other than for medical reasons. Arpad's father, the Adventist minister, kept his mouth closed about Saturday school attendance in his church, an issue so big it had caused a split in his church. Some parents let their children go to school on Saturday, because of course it was the law, and others kept their children home, facing the consequences. Sometimes this caused some church members to feel superior to others, depending on whether they kept their children at home or not. Who was holier? Arpad's father, with agony, kept his voice silent and removed himself from the church's conflict. As an example, he let his own children decide for themselves what was right in their own conscience. Though Arpad's childhood faith had been strong, a slow apathy had crept in, the result of always being expected to be a model child. In Romania, more so than in the United States, a church congregation watched and analyzed the pastor's children. When Arpad had reached junior high at the age of 13, he had rebelled, not claiming his parents' faith as his own. He wanted to be like his friends. He didn't want to be thought of as weird, so he grew indifferent to his parents' exhortations. His parents had allowed him to act on his own spiritual decisions. So, until his senior year in high school, Arpad had been interested in other things, and like many teenagers, had used religion only for social reasons. Early in his senior year, Arpad heard that the president of the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventists would come from the United States and visit his father's tiny church on a Sabbath. He grew curious. Why would such a hot shot in the Adventist church come here to the middle of nowhere? He skipped school that Saturday morning and went to listen. For the first time in years, he truly listened. Unclouded by the indifference he usually felt when he heard his father preach, he suddenly began to understand the purpose of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the reason for the hope that members claimed. And Arpad heard the voice of God speaking to his heart. From that time forward, Arpad began analyzing what he believed. With a vengeance, he began to study for himself. No more of accepting things without question as he had done as a child. This was either a true faith, every bit of it, or he didn't want any part of it. As his conviction grew, the importance of keeping the seventh day as Sabbath struck a bullseye in his conscience. It was a sign between him and his Creator, an act of loyalty and love, an acknowledgement that God is God, obedience to a command that God had never changed. He made a commitment then that would threaten his future dreams. Though he was the only child in his family to so choose, Arpad would never again attend school on Saturday, God's hallowed memorial of creation, even if it cost him his diploma. His father baptized Arpad in a large tin bathtub filled with well water in the church's courtyard, hidden from the street by a large wooden fence. The law forbade baptisms. The communists reasoned that without evangelistic meetings, proselytizing of any kind, limited pastors, and restricted books and meetings, that no one would ever reach the point of baptism. However, the more the government repressed Christianity, the more it grew. Communism didn't offer anything to most people, and for the Adventists, church was the highlight of their week. Since they were allowed only Sabbath to worship, the Adventists held worship services Friday evening and all day Saturday until sunset. It was during one of these services that his father baptized Arpad secretly in the big tub. But Arpad was too big to be completely immersed. Whenever his head was pushed down into the water, his feet would pop out. When his feet were pushed in, his head popped out. But he figured God would understand the situation. At the time, there was no other way. What do you want to do after high school, Piku? Arpad's classmate, Ferry Buzzsodi, asked another of their classmates. Ferry was etching in calligraphy on smooth white panes of glass. Piku was painting a large wooden map of Romania, a bright green. Arpad stood behind the large frame that spread like a wall across the high school shop laboratory. He was wiring a light that would push through the board to the other side and light up the town of Ploiești, where Romanian poet Necita Stănescu had been born. I don't know, Piku said. I'd like to major in some kind of art, but since I didn't get to attend an art high school, I can't go on to study at an art university. I wouldn't mind being an engineer, or maybe I'll go into construction, or maybe I'll paint houses. It can be quite intricate work, you know. If the job you're doing on Professor Rousseau's map is even half the talent you have, Arpad commented from behind the boards, you'll be doing quite well for yourself. The three classmates worked 2 hours a week on this elective shop class after school. While some students did agriculture in the fields, carpentry, electronics, metal, or woodworking, or tailoring in local shops, the three friends were given materials and guidance to help their homeroom teacher make a practical visual aid for his literature class. Arpad was the leader and designer of this special project. The boys cut a huge map of Romania out of plywood. On the board, they cut out holes for all the towns relating to famous Romanian authors and poets, their birthplaces, schools they attended, publications for which they worked, editorial positions for which they were active. From the control panel on the teacher's desk, Professor Rousseau could pull a switch and the blue bulb for poet Mihai Eminescu would light up on the map. He would then push a button, and a panel of transparent glass would light up, illuminating information about the publications Eminescu had written and other topics relating to the author's life. The display consisted of two large parts, a wooden map and a glass panel. Together, these structures took the entire length of the front of the classroom. The map stood to the left, the panel with its square grid to the right. From his desk, using a control box, Professor Rousseau would direct the stunning visual aid. As he lectured, he would simply switch knobs and push buttons, and his class would take notes from the beautiful handwriting displayed on the lighted panels. Arpad's design was Professor Rousseau's pride. Already, the school had put a lot of financial investment into this project. Representatives of the County Department of Education had come just a week before to interview Professor Rousseau about his innovation and to congratulate his workers. The local county newspaper, Steaua Rossi, the Red Star, had printed an article about it. The accompanying photo showed the teacher standing beside the half-finished project, a proud smile on his face. This looked very good for the school, and as for Professor Rousseau, he acted as though he had won a gold medal. "What do you want to do, Arpad?" Ferry asked. "Let me guess. Electronics? Carpentry? Plumbing? You could do anything. You could even be a philosophy professor." At this, the boys all laughed. "Professor Shoo, could you explain natural selection and survival of the fittest again? I don't quite understand." "Hey!" Arpad threw a small block of wood at his friend. "Stop that!" Arpad laughed at his friend's jibes. He knew they would stand by him no matter what he believed. "I'm going to become a pastor." Ferry and Piku both paused in their work. Piku whistled. "You? You sure like to make things hard on yourself," Ferry said. "The government is going to really like you now. Do you know the odds you're up against?" 1 in 1,000, probably much more than that." "What do you mean?" "To keep tight control over the spread of religion, the government only allows 10 students every 4 years to go to the seminary. Because of this, the standards of getting in are exceptionally high. I will have to take a rigorous test, get high recommendations from my church, and also from church leaders at the top." "How are you going to do that?" Ferry asked. "Who's going to give you recommendations for that? I've known you for quite a while, and you're no saint. If they knew about all the times we've had, I know, Arpad cut in. But I've really given my life to God now. Things are different for me. They will see it. God will provide a way. His friends looked uncomfortable. They were young communists, atheists, even if Arpad was not. It had been drilled into them from childhood. Arpad shrugged. Besides this, there are hundreds of applicants for the ministry. I figure the odds are pretty strong against me. It will be a miracle. What will be the real miracle is your graduating from high school, Piku warned. What's with skipping school every Saturday? You're going to be thrown out before you pass the high school exit exam or any seminary entrance exam. It's just a matter of time. Why can't you just attend for the rest of the year? Your 10th grade sister does. You've come this far. How can you ruin these plans with this stupidity? You never used to care. Professor Russo will be so disappointed, Ferry added. You know how much of his pride is in each of these light bulbs you're wiring. We couldn't finish this project without you. Arpad sighed. It was hard to be the only child of the family who wouldn't go to school on Saturday. His brother and sisters acknowledged the same religion, but they didn't seem to care about the day, just as he had not before. It's just something that I can't do anymore. My conscience won't let me. I'll just have to take the consequences. Ferry and Piku shook their heads in amazement. Say goodbye to the seminary. You'd make a better electrician or plumber. You'd probably get yourself arrested as a pastor, since you're always doing or saying something a bit too risky. Yeah, you're probably right, Arpad said, going back behind the map to hook up more light bulbs. The rest of the hour, they worked in silence. Arpad knew that he wanted more than anything to become a pastor. He had felt God's call so strongly that he had no doubt. It was a quiet conviction that filled his whole soul. Romania needed Adventist pastors desperately. They were retiring 30 to 40 pastors every 4 years, but only letting in 10 new pastors into the ministry every 4 years. The government wanted the church to die off. Although there were hundreds applying for these 10 positions, Arpad knew he had to try. He had already begun the arduous application process. It would take a miracle. God, if this is your purpose for me, help me to graduate, he prayed. I'm keeping your Sabbath, but I don't know how long I will be allowed to remain in school with all these unexcused absences. Your will be done. Arpad continued to hope and pray. He continued to skip school every Saturday. The month of this conversation, Arpad was absent 4 times, and he knew that his private decision would soon become a public one. One doesn't get sick every Saturday, and Director Tudor didn't wait long. This was a political fault, especially because it was for religious reasons. The school needed to educate Arpad out of weakness and turn him into a young communist. Director Tudor challenged Arpad continually in philosophy class. Why do you have to keep the Sabbath when the entire world doesn't keep it? Director Tudor asked. It's a Jewish custom. It has absolutely nothing to do with Christianity. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. And God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Arpad quoted. Adam wasn't a Jew. Adam was man. Adam is the father of the entire human race. It became a Jewish tradition, but it is not based on that. It has absolutely nothing to do with Jewish tradition, just like marriage doesn't have anything to do with Jewish tradition. God made man and woman and put them together and married them, he told his professor. Because you're married to your wife, does that mean you are Jewish? The class laughed. They didn't know their Bible as well as Arpad, nor as well as Director Tudor. The professor frowned. Though he loved to mock others, he did not like to be mocked. Their discussions would stop, but Director Tudor would continually bring the subject up again on other days. Still, Arpad had a reason for everything. Why do you not eat pork then? Professor Tudor tried a different angle. That's a Jewish law. Why do you not keep the rest of the Jewish laws too? God gave his people health rules because he knows exactly what is the best for us to eat. Look at the Egyptians, for example. God promised the people who obeyed his rules that none of the sicknesses that were in Egypt would have an effect on them. He knew exactly what they needed in the washing of hands, ceremonial, and health laws. That's why today, the Jewish people are healthier than most other nations. You go anywhere in the world today, and the statistics will tell you this. Eating clean meat is a lifestyle issue, one that our church has accepted. It is not one of the 10 Commandments. It is one of the health laws that we believe can still benefit us today. The next class period, Arpad brought in an article from a secular publication that showed how bad it is from a health perspective to eat non-kosher meat. The professor didn't have much to say. He would always try to humiliate Arpad in front of his classmates. But Arpad felt that the curse had turned into a blessing. He felt even closer to his classmates than before. The next Saturday, Arpad was missing again. On Monday, Director Tudor told Arpad, "Come see me in my office after school." Arpad knew that the time had come. His stomach lurched. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind, but he wasn't ready. Director Tudor's office was large and foreboding. A heavy wooden desk dominated the middle of the room. Beside the desk, a large portrait of President Ceausescu glared at Arpad, as pictures of the president did in every hallway and inside every textbook cover. To the right, by a window, hung a huge Romanian flag. Thick, hardbound volumes of communist lore and philosophy lined the shelves around the office. Director Tudor leaned back in his large black leather chair, with his fingers pressed together in an upside-down V. He tapped them together. Professor Russo, who also served as the assistant principal, sat on an opposite chair. He looked irritated, and a worried expression lined his face. Director Tudor cleared his throat. "Arpad, your attendance record shows that you're missing 5 Saturdays in a row." His eyebrows knit together, frowning. "You cannot possibly have health problems this consistently. School is not a matter of religion. It's a matter of politics. Your country must come first. You are choosing to spit upon the education your country has so generously provided. He stood up from his chair and walked to the window. Education is not a right, Arpad, he continued. It is a gift, a privilege. You do not have to be here, and you're choosing to skip school every week. He turned to face Arpad, a firm look in his eyes. If you have one more absence from school, we're going to expel you from school. Is that clear? Arpad took a deep breath. His knees felt weak. He wanted to say, okay, but it wasn't easy to ask for the flames. He cast a silent prayer upward. You can kick me out of the school, but I'm still not going to come on Saturday, my Sabbath, because my relationship with God and what I feel toward Him is a lot more important to me than what you want me to become. I know you're trying to educate me out of this, but I'm not going to become a communist. Even if I did, I would become the worst one. Arpad sighed. You wouldn't want me anyway. Take your books and don't come back. You're no longer a student here, growled Director Tudor. Get out of my sight. You bring shame on this school. You're not worthy to belong to this school. You bring shame on your country. That was the worst insult a young patriot could receive. And all students were indoctrinated in patriotism. Professor Rousseau's face looked pale. Arpad quietly took his book bag from where it rested on the floor. Ferry was right. So much for being a pastor. God, where are you when I need you? His heart hurt. A lump formed in his throat. Professor Rousseau covered his face with a hand and exhaled. Director Tudor turned his back as Arpad shut the door. The end of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Furnace. What do you have for me now? Arpad prayed. He had been reading about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the three Hebrew friends in the Bible who defied the king's command and refused to kneel before the golden idol. They had survived being thrown into a fiery furnace, and a divine being had appeared with them there. I have been thrown into the fiery furnace, but I'm not sure I see you with me, Arpad continued. Are you here? I wanted to work for you, but now it feels as though my dreams are over. How can I ever go back to school and graduate if I refuse to go to school on Saturday? I've been praying and praying. I don't know what you want me to do now. Arpad stayed home for a few days, talking over the situation with his parents. His father, despite the bleak outlook for his son, looked proud. Just wait, his father said. Jesus says that we are blessed when we are persecuted for his righteousness' sake. Something good will turn up. If what I feel right now is a blessing, I'm not sure I want it, Arpad said. They're not really persecuting me for religious reasons, are they? It's just the law. A law that wants you to follow it above the law of God, his father replied. By your actions, you are showing who is more important in your life, God or Ceausescu. I don't think you will regret it. Several days had inched by since Arpad had been thrown out of school. Gabriella, his younger sister, came home from school one afternoon with a message. "Professor Russo wants to see you tomorrow morning at 7:30, she said. He didn't tell me why. When Arpad walked into Professor Russo's office the next morning, the homeroom teacher smiled broadly, looking up from his lesson plan book. "Arpad, I had to fight for you," he said. "It wasn't easy, but you are accepted back into school on one condition. You must finish the map project by the end of the year." "Really?" Arpad exclaimed, his heart doing a cartwheel. "It was a tough case, but we decided to overlook your Saturday problem only if you give us an outstanding final product. We have invested so much time and money in this, and if you're gone, it will not be completed. Do I have your promise?" "Yes," Arpad vowed. "Don't worry, Professor Russo. The Red Star will have another updated article about your ingenious innovation by the time school is out. It will be so wonderful that all the teachers from other high schools will visit you to model it for their schools. You will be famous. I won't let you down." Professor Russo beamed. "Good. I'll see you in class." Every spare second, Arpad worked on the map. He spent extra hours every day after school, wiring the lights and switches, taking care of every detail to make it perfect. Ferry and Piku worked with him. They knew what was at stake. "That was a close one, Arpad," Piku said. "If you live your life testing fate like that, I don't know what will become of you. Professor Russo pulled you out of this one, but he won't be able to pull you through your exit exams." "God used Professor Russo to answer my prayers," said Arpad humbly. "The exit exams are in God's hands too. We have just got to get this map done." "Right," Ferry said wryly. "I don't have to agree with you on your religious beliefs to be your friend, and we don't have much time till the end of the year. Do you want help on Sunday?" Arpad smiled. What true friends, he thought. The baccalaureates. Arpad cringed at the thought. Only those who passed the infamous tests had a chance of going on to the university, the seminary in his case. He had to pass 5 tests: the Romanian oral and written tests, the math oral and written tests, and then take another test on a subject of the student's choice. For his elective, Arpad had chosen biology. By now, he knew his evolutionary theory quite well. These tests lasted anywhere from 7 to 10 days. If any of Arpad's tests were scheduled on Saturday, he wouldn't be able to complete these, and consequently, he wouldn't be able to graduate. Rescheduling was not an option. Arpad opened his test schedule gingerly, praying. His heart sank. Sure enough, his oral Romanian test was scheduled for Saturday morning. "I have lost everything," Arpad mourned, again sick at heart. "Why did I come back to school and work so hard for this if it doesn't even matter now? God, I'm going to trust you on this one because there's nothing else I can do. I'll study for them anyway." On Friday, he took the Romanian written exam and felt that he had done well, but not spectacularly. His written exam score will be multiplied by his oral exam score to give him the final grade. But 80% times 0 was still 0. he went to church on Sabbath. And when the Romanian oral test was given, he was the only one from his class who wasn't there. No one else would think of missing it. Arpad's biology exam was scheduled for Sunday morning. He awakened early. It won't make any difference, he thought, but I want to finish what I've started, for the principle of the thing, even though I'll have to retake all the tests again next year because I failed one. Arpad opened the door of the administration building, expecting the hallway to be quiet except for the students waiting for the biology exam. Instead, the hallway where the exams were going to take place hummed with more students than he expected. Arpad walked past a group of students waiting outside the door of the oral exam room. "What are you doing here?" Arpad asked. "The Romanian oral exam was yesterday." "They didn't get to all the S's yet," a classmate replied. "We have to finish up today." "Hey, you're an S. Didn't you know this?" "No," Arpad said. "I had no idea." "You're kidding me. This never happens." Professor Rusu appeared down the hall. He saw Arpad, and relief filled his face. "Arpad, come here," he said urgently. "They didn't get to the S's yesterday. You're going to be okay. Are you ready to take the oral exam right now?" Arpad's heart warmed. Even though Professor is a very strong communist leader, he's still on my side, he thought. Sure. Arpad had never been more ready. Then it was graduation day. Arpad and his fellow classmates lined up to receive their diplomas, handed to them by Director Tudor. When Arpad's turn came, the surly communist leader shook his hand and then, to Arpad's surprise, gave him a hug. "I'm proud of you, Arpad," he said. "You were a very good student." Even communist leaders have human sympathy and emotions, Arpad realized. This man was only doing his duty. "What do you think? Is he an Adventist?" asked the interrogating officer. This man, too, is only doing his duty, Arpad thought, after being interrogated by the Czech representative of religious matters. Arpad had answered the questions put to him as thoroughly as possible. "Yes, he's definitely an Adventist," the representative replied. "As you can see, he could easily be a pastor." He smiled. "He doesn't have a problem talking." The guard led Arpad back to his cell. The hours beat mercilessly inside him for several more days, turning his emotions black and blue. He had been in hopeless situations before, but this was the grand finale. By my actions, even though I was trying to help people, I have taken away the possibility of ever being useful as a minister. This echoed through his heart constantly. My poor wife. She was so courageous, and now they will send her back to Romania to be in jail as well, all because of me. I feel completely deserted. Lord, why did you let this happen? I worked so hard, so long with dedication. What are you trying to teach me? The jail door smashed open again. The interrogating warden stalked in with Cardos, the interpreter. "The Hungarians have come, asking us to release you to them. It is against the law for us to do this. We must send you back to Romania, your home country. Do you think we should send you back? Are you ready to tell us the truth?" Giving prisoners back to their own country was what countries did for each other. "I can't answer that," Arpad said, dejected. That's what I would expect to happen. At least they will know I'm telling the truth. Of course that will happen, unless you tell us who it is you are trying to smuggle out of Czechoslovakia. Again the club bruised Arpad's ribs. Then they will keep me jailed in Czechoslovakia. Arpad finished the unspoken truth in his mind. There is no one, Arpad replied. Stop. Go away. The questions, the mental torture, never seemed to end, nor did the waiting for the inevitable. This continual barrage of questions drove him crazier than the inactivity inside his cell. Once before he had waited, but then he had had a future ahead of him. The cell door slammed shut. Left alone with the spider in the window, Arpad's thoughts returned to his homeland. The end of chapter 4 of In His Hand.